My friends, there comes a moment in every honest seeker's life when the world they once knew begins to feel strangely distant. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Awakening is not a matter of gaining something new. It is a matter of shedding what was never truly yours. And the more you awaken, the more you find that the old ways of belonging no longer fit the contours of your expanding soul. You see, we spend much of our lives trying to adjust ourselves to the expectations around us. We try to be liked, to be accepted, to belong to a pattern that was set long before we ever questioned it. But once you begin waking up, once you start seeing things clearly, the game becomes transparent. The noise becomes unnecessary. The masks people wear become painfully obvious, and suddenly belonging to this world feels less like comfort and more like confinement. Awakening is simply the realization that you are more than the roles you are given. You are more than the opinions others have of you, and you are certainly more than the illusions society projects on your mind. When this becomes clear, you begin drifting away, not out of arrogance, not out of rebellion, but out of alignment with a deeper truth. The world worships busyness, but the awakened mind values stillness. The world prioritizes appearance, but the awakened heart seeks authenticity. The world teaches competition, but the awakened spirit understands that nothing in this universe is truly separate from anything else. And so, you stop belonging to the world not because you are lost, but because you have finally found yourself. The less you belong, the more peaceful you become. The less you fit in, the more clearly you see the design behind the chaos. You find yourself drawn to solitude, not as an escape, but as a sanctuary. You begin choosing depth over popularity, purpose over approval, silence over noise. And in that silence you realize you are connected to everything, far more deeply than the world ever taught you to be. Awakening is not a departure from life. It is a return to it. It is the moment you stop walking the path laid before you and begin walking the path that rises to meet your feet. You understand that belonging was never the goal. The goal was to see, to perceive life as it is, not as you were told it should be. And once you see, you cannot unsee. So if you find yourself feeling like you no longer belong, do not worry. This is not a sign of isolation. It is a sign of evolution. You are shedding old skins, old beliefs, old attachments. You are stepping into a version of yourself that is more spacious, more present, more alive. The ones who awaken were never meant to blend in. They were meant to illuminate. They were meant to live with a quiet freedom that defies explanation. They were meant to remind the world of what it has forgotten. So walk your path with courage. Let the world think you are strange. Let the noise accuse you of not belonging. For the farther you drift from the world, the closer you come to your true home. The vast, boundless awareness that has been waiting for you all along. Awakening is not loneliness. It is liberation. Awakening brings a subtle yet undeniable shift inside. A kind of inner clarity that makes your old life feel too small for who you are becoming. You start noticing that many of the roles you once played were not formed from your own truth, but from expectations placed upon you long before you ever knew you had a choice. As you grow in awareness, you begin to sense that the world around you asks you to fit into patterns that no longer feel natural. The more you awaken, the less comfortable you are pretending, and the less you desire approval from people who never truly knew your inner reality. It is not rebellion that creates this distance, it is realization. When you see things as they are instead of as you were trained to see them, you naturally step away from illusions. You begin to understand that belonging, as society defines it, often requires a level of self-abandonment. You are expected to adjust your values so you can blend in, to silence your inner voice so you can follow paths created by others, to ignore your intuition so you can maintain an image accepted by the crowd. Awakening cuts through these expectations like light through fog. You stop trying to keep up appearances because your inner guidance becomes louder than any external pressure. This process can feel lonely at times, but it is not loneliness in a negative sense. It is space. It is spaciousness created by letting go of what no longer aligns with your expanding awareness. You might find yourself stepping away from old groups, old conversations, old circles that once felt comforting but now feel limiting. Not because you judge anyone, but because you can no longer shrink yourself to fit standards that no longer resonate with your spirit. Awakening also dissolves the desire to perform. You no longer seek validation for your choices because you realize your worth does not depend on confirmation from others. You start living from your inner center rather than from the surface. This is why belonging begins to fade. Society often encourages people to follow routines without questioning, to adopt beliefs without exploring, to play roles without asking if those roles nurture the soul. Once you awaken, you can no longer participate in these patterns unconsciously. You see too clearly, you feel too deeply, and as you grow in awareness, you discover that real belonging comes from authenticity. You belong wherever your truth is expressed fully. You belong in spaces where your presence does not need to be edited. You belong with individuals who see you without expecting you to compromise your essence. You belong to yourself first, and from that self-belonging, every connection becomes more genuine, more grounded, more alive. So the more you awaken, the less you belong to the world as it used to be, but the more you belong to your own soul. This is not loss, it is liberation. It is the quiet freedom that arrives when you no longer trade your inner truth for external acceptance as your inner life grows clearer. You begin to favor sincerity over display, calm over frenzy, and depth over empty noise. You no longer feel drawn to impress crowds or adjust your spirit to fit ideals built on surface-level values. Instead, you start to sense a pull toward living in a way that feels real, grounded, and free of performance. Approval from others loses its old importance because your sense of direction rises from within rather than from opinions around you. You no longer measure your progress by applause or validation. You measure it by the quiet alignment you feel inside. You notice that many people follow patterns simply because everyone else does, yet you now crave a life guided by awareness rather than habit. This shift draws you toward stillness, moments where your mind can settle, moments where your intuition can speak without distraction. You start noticing how noise fills most conversations, how many voices talk without truly connecting, and you find yourself craving silence not as escape but as nourishment. In stillness, you feel more alive, more awake, more present. You begin selecting fewer but more meaningful connections, valuing quality over quantity. You learn to listen to your inner signals, to trust subtle feelings that once went ignored. Authenticity becomes your compass, guiding your choices, your relationships, your actions. You notice how rare genuine connection is in a world so focused on images and influence. You become attracted to sincerity, to individuals who live with awareness, who speak from depth rather than ego. You also gain a new appreciation for solitude. Being alone no longer feels like isolation. It feels like a return to your inner center. In solitude, you remember your own voice without interruption. You remember your values, your dreams, your quiet wisdom. And in this space you realize you no longer crave external approval. You simply desire alignment with your own truth. As your awareness expands, you naturally step back from environments filled with pretense or competition. You sense when conversations drain your energy or pull you away from your center. You learn to walk away from situations where you must dilute your sincerity to fit in. You seek places where your presence feels natural, where your spirit does not need to shrink, where your inner clarity is not dimmed by constant noise. Over time, this alignment brings a deep sense of relief. You no longer analyze every action for public acceptance. You no longer bend yourself to meet expectations that do not resonate with your values. You live from an inner steadiness that cannot be given or taken by anyone outside you. And in this calm, genuine place, life begins to feel lighter, more meaningful, more real. You discover that choosing authenticity, stillness, and depth is not withdrawal from life. It is a return to the core of living, where your soul guides your steps with quiet certainty. Transformation often brings a strange sense of distance, a quiet feeling that you are drifting away from places, routines, and circles that once felt familiar. This distance is not a sign of losing your way, but of finding a new alignment inside yourself. When your awareness expands, you begin sensing the subtle difference between being alone and being disconnected. What once felt like belonging now feels like confinement, and what once felt like solitude now feels like clarity. This shift can confuse you at first. You may wonder why old environments no longer feel right, why conversations that used to entertain now feel shallow, why you feel out of place in spaces where you once felt secure. Yet this is not a sign of regression. It is a sign of evolution. As your awareness grows, you start recognizing patterns in others and in yourself that you were unable to see before. You become more attuned to energies, intentions, and emotional atmospheres. You can sense when you are not being fully seen, or when people engage with you out of routine rather than genuine connection. You notice when interactions drain you more than they nourish you. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is a new form of inner intelligence. It reveals what your soul can no longer tolerate and what it now desires: honesty, clarity, depth, sincerity. This is why the feeling of not belonging emerges. You are no longer able to participate in cycles that require you to ignore your own inner signals. You cannot force yourself into spaces where authenticity is absent. You cannot pretend to be comfortable around people who value surface level interactions while you crave meaning. You can no longer silence your inner voice just to maintain familiar relationships. The discomfort you feel is simply your spirit signaling that you are outgrowing an older version of yourself. At the same time, this experience teaches you that not belonging is not the same as being alone. In fact, this stage of awakening often becomes the most empowering phase of your life. You start discovering parts of yourself that were buried under expectations, noise, and old habits. You learn that solitude can be a sanctuary where your intuition strengthens, where your inner wisdom becomes clearer, where you can reconnect with your deepest purpose without distraction. The more you trust this process, the more peaceful you feel. You begin allowing people, situations, and environments to fall away naturally without resisting or clinging. Eventually, you realize that the sense of not belonging was never a problem. It was guidance. It was life nudging you toward new spaces, new connections, new levels of growth. It was preparing you for relationships rooted in authenticity rather than convenience, for environments that resonate with your expanding awareness, for experiences that reflect the person you are becoming. Feeling out of place is simply the first step toward finding where your soul truly fits. It is not a sign that you are losing your place in the world. It is a sign that you are finding your place within yourself, and from there, everything else aligns. Those who awaken carry a quiet light within them, a light that subtly sets them apart from the ordinary movements of life. They are not meant to blend into the structures that revolve around routine, pressure, and imitation. Instead, they carry an inner clarity that slowly guides them toward a different way of living. This clarity is not loud, nor is it proud. It is gentle, steady, and unmistakable. It makes them see life from a wider view, one that shows the deeper flow beneath events, the subtle connections between actions, and the inner motives of people. Because of this expanded perception, they no longer feel aligned with places that demand conformity, or with groups that encourage superficial living, they naturally drift toward a more liberated expression of self. As awareness deepens, a person becomes more sensitive to environments that dim their natural energy. They can sense when they are expected to play a role that does not reflect their inner reality. They can feel when conversations are empty, when interactions lack presence, when people engage without sincerity. Instead of forcing themselves to adapt, they begin to step away from these patterns. Not out of conflict, but out of truth. Their inner life becomes stronger than any desire to fit in, and soon they realize that fitting in was never their task to begin with. They were meant to bring a different kind of presence into the world. This presence is not about superiority, it is about awareness. When you carry awareness, you move differently. Your actions come from intention rather than impulse. Your words come from understanding rather than reaction. Your choices reflect your inner values rather than external demands. This difference alone creates a natural separation from circles that operate through distraction, routine, and conformity. You notice that many people rush through life without seeing the beauty of small moments, without reflecting on their emotions, without questioning their direction. You begin to live in a quieter, more conscious rhythm, and this rhythm becomes your guide. As you continue on this path, you discover that your purpose is not to blend into the world, but to gently influence it through your presence. Not through force, not through argument, but through example. When you embody calmness in a noisy world, you remind others of their own inner calm. When you choose sincerity in a place filled with pretense, you show others that authenticity is possible. When you act from inner freedom, you give silent permission for others to seek their own. You become a mirror that reflects truth simply by being yourself. In time, you grow comfortable with the idea that you were not meant to follow the same path as everyone else. You were meant to carry a unique light, a unique awareness, a unique way of seeing. And by living in alignment with this inner clarity, you naturally illuminate the world around you. You may not belong to the world as it once was, but you belong to the deeper flow of life, and from there, your presence creates quiet transformation. Wherever you go, the message of this speech comes down to a simple yet powerful truth. Awakening changes the way you move through life. As your awareness expands, you naturally drift away from patterns, people, and environments that no longer match the person you are becoming. This distance is not failure or isolation. It is a sign of inner growth. You begin choosing sincerity over appearance, depth over noise, and alignment over approval. The sense of not belonging becomes a doorway into your true path, guiding you toward a life shaped by clarity rather than conditioning. And as you walk this path, you realize you were never meant to blend into the world's illusions. You were meant to carry a quiet light that inspires others without effort. This journey leads you not away from life, but toward a truer, freer version of yourself, where belonging arises not from fitting in, but from living in full alignment with your inner truth.